the next discussions and forums because we have a lot of interesting things that could be discussed. So I would request one and all to please have a seat. Initiative by the COE is the Healthcare Innovation Challenge, which is a unique program to drive the digital transformation of the healthcare providers in this country. So welcoming you all to the 11th edition of the Life Sciences and Healthcare Innovation Forum by NASSCOM. I would request one and all to please have a seat so that we could start the debate session and other forums as well. Representing identity.
Good afternoon. My name is Shanti Raju. I am the founder and CEO of Identity, and we are based in US. We all know that medical emergency can happen to anyone, anywhere, and at any time. And the first hour of a medical emergency is called the golden hour because if informed treatment is given during this hour, a patient's life can be saved. This is the core concept of our project. Our software is patient-centric, patient-owned, AI-driven, and we are trying to bridge the gap between the patient, paramedics, and the hospital because during medical emergency, the patient can be transported to any hospital nearby, regardless to whichever hospital they are transported to. Their information will be digitally, securely, and immediately transferred to the hospital. So how this is being achieved is our customers can enroll with us with their personal and health information, and they'll be assigned a QR code. This QR code, when scanned by paramedics, they can digitally access the patient's information securely, and they can transfer this to the nearest hospital where the patient will be transported to. Even before the patient arrives at the hospital, now the hospital and ER doctors will have the patient's health history, and they will be much prepared to treat the patient, and they can save a life. This will not only save patient's life, but also time by cutting down the process a lot. So this is our core concept, and this will be very useful for senior citizens, children who are more prone to medical emergencies because of their age and fall injuries and their health condition, and also for pre-existing health condition patients. So this is what we are trying to achieve here, and I would like to thank Dr. Shravan Subramaniam, who is president for Nat Health, who invited me for the last event, and that is why I am here now, and also NASSCOM to give me this great opportunity to share our company with all of you. Thank you very much. Any questions?
If the audience have some questions, one could be permitted, so anyone with anything? Seems like everyone's already curious about whatever it is, but you have the stall. You can actually visit that and gain much more information about it. So ladies and gentlemen, with this, we move to the first panel of the session on Investor Panel, Enabling Innovation Ecosystem in Healthcare. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Naveen Kashyap, who is the VP Digital Innovation and Services of Yokogawa Electric Japan, who will be our moderator for the session. Committed to building leaders and helping people and organizations realize their potential, Naveen drives strategic business initiatives through building and managing high-performance teams. He is a management executive with substantial experience in software and industrial automation projects execution, marketing, R&D, product management, and organizational management. Well-traveled and experienced in managing cross-functional and transactional teams with proven interpersonal and leadership skills, appreciation of IP laws. Please join your hands together for Mr. Naveen Kashyap, who will be the moderator today. Also, join your hands together to welcome our panelists, Ms. Madhurima Agarwal, the Managing Director of Microsoft for Startups India. A journey that started as an entrepreneur, passing through the hallowed halls of IIM Ahmedabad and years of diverse experiences and building a repertoire of multifaceted skills today enables Madhurima drive innovation and a new way to look at things. Now, join your hands together for Mr. Krishnan Neelakantan, the partner of Ankur Capital. Mr. Krishnan Neelakantan comes with nearly 2 decades of experience across financial markets, investment research, and social development consulting. He focuses on formulating strategic growth plans for Ankur. Now, join your hands together for Ashwin Raghuram, co-founder and partner of the Bharat Innovation Fund. Ashwin is an early-stage tech investor, venture capital fund manager, have executed a full fund cycle from creation to exit, institution builder, startup advisor, public policy contributor, and shippy. He is deeply involved in India's startup ecosystem for over a decade. So with this move, with the first panel of session, starting off, enabling innovation ecosystem in the healthcare. Thank you.
On the outset, let's thank NASSCOM for providing us an opportunity to be here on stage and share our thoughts on some of these very interesting questions around or themes around enabling the innovation ecosystem around life tech in India. And let me welcome my co-panelists, Ashwin, Krishnan, and Madhurima, to have a bit of fun here on stage as we engage in some banter. Welcome to one and all. So just to set the context right, I think it might make a lot of sense for us to introduce our organizations, and specifically from the context of what we do for this space of life tech as a whole. So can we start with you, Madhurima?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So I work for Microsoft for startups. As all of you know, Microsoft today and Gen AI is going hand in hand. So that's the biggest thing we are working on today. But at Microsoft for Startups, we've got a program called Founders Hub where we invite all startups, irrespective of the stage, which start right from idea stage till Series C, who can be part of it and get a lot of benefits. Of course, cloud credits, OpenAI credits, all that is there. But apart from that, a lot of mentoring, hand-holding about how to go about building your business as well is something that we do and work with a lot of startups in this space.
Thank you for inviting me to this event. I'm Krishnan from Ankur Capital. We're an early stage fund, and while we're a sector agnostic fund, we operate on looking for 2 key themes. One is the opportunities being created by digitalization across large fragmented sectors. And the other is around promoting and investing into deep science innovation, so core IP technology that helps to solve problems for India as well as similar parts of the world. And so we look at healthcare innovation from both these lenses, and we've invested in 4 companies which again straddle both these themes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ashwin Raghuraman. I'm glad to be here. We are an early stage venture capital fund focused on deep tech startups that are building globally competitive IP. Invest in the early stages. So typically a pre-series A or a series A round is where we come in. And we are fairly sector agnostic as well. Of course, with the caveat that we have a strong focus on healthcare just from a thesis standpoint and where we invest. Apart from having as one of our investors itself, Philips Healthcare. And that brings a lot of focus to where we invest. So we invest across biotech, we invest across digital health, we invest across devices, but anything that is creating some amount of deep tech or IP is what we focus on. I think we'll end up with a portfolio of about 15 to 16 companies from our Fund 1, of which we expect about 5 to 6 to be in the healthcare space. We already have 3 companies in the healthcare space, adding another 2 where we've already given term sheets. And this is my second fund. My first fund also, we invested in a few healthcare companies like Mitra Biotech and so on. And from an ecosystem standpoint, I also sit on some of the investment committees from BIRAC under the Department of Biotech, which provides both grant funding at a very early stage as well as has soft loan programs for healthcare technologies that are getting commercialized.
Thank you, thank you. I think it's been pretty interesting. And for those of you who are wondering or who are aware of what Yokogawa is, right, we are actually a pioneer in industrial automation. And if you are trying to see me as an odd pool here on the panel, let me introduce. While Yokogawa has actually been a pioneer in measurement and information sciences, so to say, for about 100 years plus right now, we also do operate in the life sciences and life innovation space, primarily with our high-end confocal scanners, medical imaging systems, intracellular membrane management systems, and bioreactors, which we actually call as the enablers for the bio-industrial autonomy. Right, and probably I thought that gives me a right to probably be here and have fun with my fellow panelists as we run through some questions. And the second connect that we as Yokogawa have is there has been a guiding vision for us, which has been leading us for about 100 years, which is focus on overall well-being powered by net zero carbon emissions, as well as anchoring ourselves in a circular economy. And overall well-being definitely touches the life sciences space of it. So these are the two connects that we do enjoy with the ecosystem. So some of my questions could probably have that bias when I try to really shoot it at my co-panelists over here. And I'm your representative here trying to have fun, right? Thank you so much for your quick introductions. And I think since we are trying to talk about innovation, I think one thing what we need to really be very clear about is, apart from the jingoism, innovation is also catalyzed or accelerated by the rate of technical adoption. I'm just bringing forward the discussions that we were having at the coffee table there, right? So adoption actually catalyzes or accelerates innovation. And if you try to really look at it, electricity took 65 years to reach 40% adoption, right? Mobile telephony took close to about 15 years of time. Normal telephony took about 40 years of time to reach 40% adoption. So if we are trying to talk about all these elements there and try to draw a parallel and ask ourselves, in terms of adoption of technology in life tech and health tech spaces, where do you put us on the journey? That would be a very interesting perspective to get from all the three of you now. Over to you, Madhurima. Let's start with you.
So it's a very difficult question to begin with, right? It's like we have to crystal gaze and come up with an answer. I don't believe in that. But I think if you look at history, while I truly believe that past performance is not an indicator of future performance, but history does teach us a lot, right? In India, in the past few years, the rate of change that we have seen has just accelerated in the tech space, right? And if you draw a parallel from that, then there is no reason to feel why life and health sciences would be any behind, right? It is one of the most difficult areas to operate in because of the nature of the industry itself, the sensitivity, the impact it has on daily life, the kind of investments that is required to really come up with anything meaningful. But what we have been seeing recently, even as I talk to a lot of startups, is that post-COVID really, during COVID, people realized the importance of healthcare. And then that is the time when everybody accelerated on the digital front. And that got absorbed into what traditionally was a very conservative business. The reason we saw so much vaccine development happen so fast, huge contribution of technology, right? You could actually isolate the protein, create compounds, AI would help you do that, which otherwise would take a lot of years if you had to do it manually. So if looking at that and extrapolating that in the future, there's a huge jump that life and health sciences is going to happen in India. And jingoism aside, I think wherever there's an opportunity, we Indians kind of find a way. We have that frugal mindset, we have that can-do attitude, we have a ready market that is there, and that allows us to really test in the local market. Sometimes, because the market is not so, it's so different, it's not very homogeneous, you actually within the country can go to the rural sector, go to the urban sector, do all kind of market research, analysis, experiments that one wants to do. But I want to just let my esteemed panelists speak more on this.
Thanks. So, given that we are an sector agnostic fund and we have been watching the adoption of technology in very different business segments as well as consumer segments, I would say that, in the healthcare space, it's probably in the second tier in terms of the progression of adoption. But having said that, from this point, we are very excited about how things will progress. The reason is from the second tier is probably because there's a very high level of trust building that needs to be built between the consumer of the service and the deliverer of the service, right? And that's not, the progression towards using technology is not that obvious in many situations. That said, like Madhurima said, I think COVID created a situation where, access itself was, there was a combination of lack of access and an emergency situation, right? And if you overlay that with what's been happening in general in terms of technology adoption, people getting familiar, in terms of just the fact that we are now actually going to think more about the aging of our population over the next few years. And in general, a proliferation or a thought process of, being more up towards healthy living and well-being, I think all of these are factors which should create an acceleration from this point. Another factor I'll just mention is that even when you think about core IP creation, whether it is, biotech, biology-based solutions, or, just the intelligence or data science, right? I think where we are today in terms of computational technologies, just the sheer availability of data and the power to consume and analyze that, that's also going to crunch the progression of technologies hitting the markets, right? And that's another area that, so we're very bullish on this space because of a combination of all of these factors.
So, there's no doubt it's a massive market that we are looking to address, right? I mean, think of disease burden in India, and it's huge. And if we take just even 3 or 4 of the top diseases, I think they themselves provide a big solution, metrics to be addressed, but at the same time, an opportunity for innovators. So what's been the problem? And there has been a problem, right? Which is on the adoption side. On the supply side, I think, if I look at it, are the technologies there? Yes. Are there mature technologies that are coming, especially from the startup world? The answer is yes. And the challenges, I think, predominantly are on the adoption side, which are 2 in my mind. We also have the sector agnostic view, and therefore when we compare, let's say, hospitals or doctors as customers with some of the other sectors, I think they're the hardest customers to sell to. They've been the latest to come to the party. You've seen banks setting up their own accelerator programs to incubate startups and bring them into their systems, to sandbox them. You've seen less of that happening with hospitals, but a little bit of that is now changing in the last couple of years, and that makes me very bullish. That A, hospitals are now starting to work with the startup world and trusting their technology, which they weren't earlier. B, the number of doctor-driven and doctor-advised healthcare startups I've come across in the last 1 to 2 years is probably 50 times what I'd come across in the last, 10 years before that. And it is, especially in healthcare, very important for a subject matter expert to be there and help the startup or even to create a startup. But at the same time, I do believe that what will happen is a rubbing off effect where medical professionals sitting in hospitals or otherwise are adopting trust technology because it's been built by people from their sort of social base or social circle. The second part is while India has sort of seemed to be a large market from a healthcare standpoint, it isn't. It's probably 10,000 small markets. And what does that mean? To get into each of these and sell your solution is extremely hard, big customer acquisition costs, and therefore distribution spends are extremely high and extremely difficult. And where I see that perhaps changing is with the advent of the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission and the possibility of that to sort of coalesce this so many different markets into almost a single or a few consolidated markets. and therefore make it easier for innovators to distribute into a healthcare market in a more efficient and effective way. So these two triggers put together, I mean, to answer your question more directly, we're very early and nascent in terms of our ecosystem, but I think there's going to be exponential growth because of these two triggers.
Thank you. I think all of us seem to agree on one aspect, that the opportunities are galore, but we are in an early state, but you have made a good start or a good beginning, right? And I think while we were trying to talk about the overall ecosystem, there were also some specific references or oblique references to how the Indian ecosystem becomes a bit more unique, right? Particularly in the context of reading up a recent report from the World Economic Forum, which says one of the primary drivers for accelerated adoption of technology in healthcare is, number one, availability of a lot of patient data. Number two is the maturity and ability of technology to really crunch them or digest that particular data. So going back to the previous session wherein the Honorable Secretary of the Government of India was actually trying to pitch for a common data platform, do you really think that as India, we do have that amount of clinical data and patient data, which is one of the key drivers for technical adoption? If it doesn't exist, now how do we really convert that as an opportunity instead of a challenge? I would probably want to start off from Krishnan's perspective, if you could probably try answering this question as a whole.
Yeah, I'll come at it by saying that, I mean, we have probably a large storage of repository of data just because of the number of people that we have, and healthcare is a core part of anyone's journey, but it is all fragmented. So I think how you integrate all of this, how you make the experience seamless is a challenge going ahead, and therefore it's very encouraging to see that there's so much of focus on trying to make it happen right from the top level, right? Because I don't think this is something that you can only do bottom up. And so I think it will clearly play a role in bringing richer solutions. But the other point I want to also add is that there is still so much of lack of access, right? And so much of that lack of access has to do with lack of physical infrastructure and lack of, service providers or professionals, whether they be doctors or whether they be A&M people. And this is where the role for technologies to help to create that access. So like, for instance, one of our companies is in the early stage breast cancer detection. And what you're doing there is you're basically disrupting the need for, more expensive equipment that will also require skilled professionals. So how do you bring in a screening solution which then simplifies access and therefore adds to data collection in a very, very tangible way in a very short period of time, right? And then you can start looking at even population data sets to further refine how you will look at individual use cases. So to my mind, I think, you have an overarching sort of platform creation that will help drive this. But it's also the fact that today we, as we use technology to collect this sooner, you can actually build up large data pools much, much more quickly than what we might have seen in the past.
That's good. I think, Ashwin, do you have any different perspective on this part?
Not really different, but to add to perhaps what Krishnan said, I mean, obviously we have a phenomenal amount of data, being 1/6 or more of the world's population and growing, and we need to leverage that. I think a lot of solutions will be built for this population given the size of the population from a health standpoint. If I look at my relatively successful two other AI companies, their biggest moat has been their ability to procure proprietary data. Very often they have not found it outside there in some database that they can just buy or somebody else can go and buy. So it becomes proprietary. Spent enormous amounts of time and effort annotating that data. At points in time they've had like massive teams, 1/4 of the company just working on annotating data so that they can then consume it. But these are the guys who succeeded in scaling, raising next rounds and so on, right? Because they now have proprietary data, they now have unique data, they have annotated data which they can consume and their AI can ingest to give out meaningful outcomes. I think the same paradigm can play in the health space. Is there sufficient data that exists today? I think the answer on the health side, I think the answer is no. Are we getting there? We have started in the last, I think, 3, 4, maybe 5 years to start accumulating, storing, capturing some of the data that we didn't have earlier. In healthcare specifically, longitudinal data is important. So the more single patient data over time you can acquire, the better it becomes to be able to consume and come out with meaningful outcomes. And I think the process has started where we now are sitting on a reasonable amount of data. The cleanliness of that data is still in question. The sort of, let's say, the comprehensiveness of that data is still in question, but we are getting there. And I think the key second part of this equation has always been around who owns this data and consent and privacy related issues, security related issues, which I think are also getting resolved at a policy level. This debate has been raging again for the past 4 or 5 years amongst various people, policy makers, hospital owners, healthcare practitioners, and so on, as to how a patient's data can be used, leveraged by others, by themselves, what is the model? And I do think that the more recent data bill is trying to address it in some ways, and with some amount of further discussion and refinement will take us there. But certainly I think the ability, therefore, or we are poised at the right space for people to say, let me take India data, let me take Indian patient data and consume it well. And just to give you an example, we've been looking at the genomics or genetic space for a while now. And what is coming together are now a few startups which are saying we've captured enough Indian patient data, and this is so different from Caucasian data that putting out a specific solution with this for India is going to become, a huge possibility.
I think that was a very interesting perspective. While we try to talk about non-availability of data or probably in the accumulation of data itself to be an issue, you rightly point out that that's where the real opportunity also lies, right? So there is a lot of potential available to be exploited in terms of data gathering and managing clinical data. That's a space wherein we would probably see a lot of innovations coming up as well, right, with the application of the right technologies. A very interesting perspective. So let me fire this question back to Madhurima. What do you think is the role of IP-led innovation or product-led innovation in terms of accelerating data gathering and also surmounting some of the challenges that Ashwin was actually bringing up?
Yeah, see, I think there are two things. One is you build a product. One is you have the data that can be used to, enhance your product and stuff. So if you say, if I understand your question right, are you saying that do we build a product which can help in this data analysis and stuff? That's not so difficult really, right? That is the easier part of the problem. The harder part, as Ashwin said, is understanding who owns that data, what can be done with that data, what's allowed, what's not, the privacy, the security, the ethics part. There's a big debate. Anybody who's heard the word AI know there's a huge ethics debate that goes on about using the data. Is the data biased? Is the data clean? So if somebody has to just focus on solving for that, that's not a big problem as such. It's a data analytics problem, and we have a lot of data analytics tools. India is fairly advanced in that state, a lot of startups that do it. But I think the future lies where once all these issues are sorted out, right, that the data is in place, we know how we can use it in a meaningful manner, and you've built a product around the health tech space, how do you find the product market fit, right? Just building a product is not enough. You have to ensure that there is a market for it, which is when a startup becomes, really successful and grows. Just having a product in isolation, sorry, that's just a product, that's technology. That's not a business that you're building. So you have to find that product market fit. You have to find someone who's willing to pay for what your offering is in the market. And that is when, you're able to monetize and grow. So the goal of any business, as I feel, is, being profitable. Otherwise, it's not a business, it's just a hobby. So if you're looking at building a middleware which solves for this thing about, how do you use the data, that's solvable as long as these basic issues around data get solved.
So So we are also trying to really look at the evolution of the regulatory space, right, associated with all this compliance and then ownership, ethics, and other things also being sorted out as we speak. But the point that you actually did make was product in itself might not be a sole answer to solve the entire jigsaw puzzle, but it's definitely a very important part of it, right? And I think given Krishnan comes from a background wherein they focus or they drive IP-driven innovation or IP-led innovation, so would you want to share your perspectives on the same question, Krishnan?
No, absolutely. I think there is a big gap from product development to commercial success, and I use the word success because you can get into the market, but you need not necessarily be successful, because that's when you kind of start to understand whether there is really a product market fit. Until then, it was all just on the basis of a hypothesis that you may have had. So when we look at companies which are coming from a deep science tech lens, right? I think we spend a lot of time and going beyond our own resources, because we are not necessarily the scientists in the room, to try and understand how robust the IP is. What's the scientists' own inclination to follow the same path of proving and validating their IP, protecting their IP, and then taking the regulatory pathway, the most robust regulatory pathway that is necessary before they get their product into the market. So what you need is a right combination of really establishing that you have validated, credible product which is regulatorily compliant to get into all the right markets or the best of the markets, and then whether from a team standpoint, right, and from a business model standpoint, you've got the right approach to get into the market and keep growing in the market, right? So are you fixated on, going the whole hog in terms of providing the product to the market, or do you look at partnerships? Do you have the right teams to think about all the various strategies and, execution muscle needed to commercialize? So I think that's very different from just looking at, let's say, a health tech platform, which is trying to bring in a tech layer into a more traditional business. So I think that's where we see the big difference.
I think that was a very good compliment to what we started off discussing, right? So it's not an independent piece. IP-led innovation is not an independent piece in itself, but it's a true enabler, and there's a larger part of the problem that needs to be solved outside that, right? So I think the next question for me in that case is to Ashwin. So you said you're also representing the deep tech space, right? You see a lot of startups, your funds actually curate and make a lot of investments into that. And then you also try to really do a bit of health tech and life tech, right? What are the commonalities and the differences that you as an investor look at when you try to talk about these two ecosystems as a whole? So a short answer would be very much appreciated.
Yeah, I think 3 or 4 things. I already spoke about one. The nature of the customer is very different. And in the health tech, biotech space is a harder customer by far to deal with. And therefore, there's a certain dynamic there. The second just to elaborate a little bit further, this health tech space or healthcare space is very different from other spaces in almost the multi-stakeholder nature of the ecosystem. You have a person, the patient, who's consuming a product, who hasn't selected the product. Somebody else, a doctor, has selected for you. A third person, an insurer, is paying for that, right? And then you throw in, let's say, a device manufacturer or a drug, pharmaceutical company. And then somewhere in the middle of all this, there's a hospital which has its own processes, right? And then the regulator and policies. So it's such a multi-stakeholder environment that for an innovator or a startup founder to succeed, you have to understand extremely well the dynamics with, at least as far as your product or space is concerned, and how each of these come together, and how you need to navigate each of these to arrive at a successful commercial venture, right? It's not just about building the technology, as people have said. It's about navigating each of these people and then figuring out models which are very different to models that you would otherwise see in enterprise SaaS or in other areas of deep tech. I think the second piece, again, which was touched upon a little bit earlier, is there is something that we need to keep in mind called the regulatory pathway when it comes to healthcare startups. It's a very highly regulated space. There is time, money, effort, and a lot of thinking that goes into how you navigate the regulatory pathway. And many entrepreneurs I have found underestimate the challenges that lie in taking a product through the regulatory pathway, understanding it well. And the folks who succeeded are the ones who at least got it right to some extent. Even the people who think about it the best generally underestimate it. I've seen that as well. But if you got it roughly there and thereabouts, this is a resource and time-consuming activity that you need to go through. The third piece is, while you may be able, the concept of MVP in other areas works very well, right? For people who don't know minimum viable product, which is what is the least version of your product you can take to the market. And I think in other areas, it's much easier to take, your MVP is much earlier in the evolution. In healthcare, I think clinical validation plays such an important role. Designing those studies well, executing on those studies well, and being able to showcase the results of those studies well before you get into market is important. So your MVP almost moves a little bit because you can't just experiment the way you do with others because it's in a space like healthcare. I mean, these are the top three. There are many more, but I'll stop with these.
Perfect. I think it's a very interesting thing. Yes, please. Quick one.
Which is just reflecting on the journey of two of our startups, and you find that this challenge is visible in terms of adoption, whether you are serving rural community who really don't have very access to the mainstream healthcare as we know it, or a much more affluent community who are looking at a very specific solution delivered through a AI-led platform, right? So the end result is you still find that adoption is much slower than what you might have expected because of either the multiple stakeholders or the fact that even if the consumers look very different, there are nuances on why they choose not to adopt from their own mindset, right? So it's a very fragmented market to address.
Okay, I think this question would need a 10-second answer from every one of you. I think beyond jingoism, we don't want India to be synonymous with frugality or affordability, right? There are many outbound innovations, particularly in the health tech space, that can actually go abroad, right? And then serve a larger space and impact many more lives socially. So what do you think is that one critical success factor for most of the companies in our space to really apply for a visa to go abroad, right? Or target a larger market globally? A quick answer, a 10-second answer from every one of you would be much appreciated.
I think all startups need to dream big with open eyes. That's really what it is. Aspire high, you can do it, have that confidence, and we should not let anything stop us. As founders, it's our passion, it's our duty, it's the speciality about entrepreneurs that they can overcome all odds and still achieve. So irrespective of whether you're looking at Indian market or global, whichever field it is, I always tell them, dream big, but with open eyes, because you should be practical at the same time. I know it's a general answer, but I would stick to that.
Yeah, I would just say that the global market, don't think only of, say, the US, Europe, and other developed markets. The market for globally, right, for solutions that, high quality solutions that can come out of India, in outside of these developed markets itself is very large, right? And I think we are very well poised to build solutions for that.
I think two. One is product differentiation. You've got to be much better than what exists. Either your accuracy has to be better or maybe even cost in some cases, but you've got to be much better. The second part is execution. You've got to execute well, especially when you're going global with solutions. It's not easy. And I've seen most people with good product differentiation, not most people, but many, don't execute well and therefore not unable to push their products into the market. So a combination of these two is what will enable success.
Okay. So I think the penultimate question for me would be, how do we see the healthcare innovation ecosystem 3 years down the line in context of India? This is a very open question, but I'm asking a very, a very pointed or a concise answer. Would any one of you want to volunteer that? Would you dare imagining and envisioning a path for the innovation ecosystem state 3 years henceforth? Ashwin.
Let me try. It's always hard to crystal ball gaze, even though that seems to be part of our job, right, as VCs. But I think three things, which is almost a continuation of some of the things I spoke about, right? I think stronger policy, which defines or helps define what's happening. The second is a lot more entrepreneurship, a lot more startups that are addressing multiple problems that exist. And I think, as I spoke about earlier, a continuation of a trend where medical professionals become more involved in creating solutions. I think the fourth one, if I can add, we keep talking about access. I think in 3 years from today, people's abilities to access health is going to be very different from what it is today in two parts. The first part is rural and people who've not had access or find it difficult to access. I think tech is going to enable a lot of access. I spoke about ABDM. I think what UPI did for payments, the UHI, which is a planned effort, is going to do as far as health is concerned. The second part of access is, I think, every one of us, and we don't live in Tier 2, Tier 3 or rural, we live in urban. And even for us, access to health and quality health is difficult. We have poor sort of experiences at hospitals, even the best, in terms of wait times, in terms of so many things. I think that is going to improve as well drastically because of tech.
So the last round, I think it would be a set of rapid fire questions. If all of you could probably raise your hands as well, along with my co-panelists here. 2026, 30th of June. I'm anchoring that there. I'm raising a set of probably presumptions and assumptions. All of you who believe that's actually going to be true, please raise your hands. The World Economic Forum's report lists the top 3 innovators in the global health tech space or life tech space to be coming in from India. How many of you believe in this statement? 2025. The top 3. One among the top 3. Okay, let's relax it. Okay? One. Okay, that's fine. That's interesting. The next question for all of you. 2 billion lives globally impacted positively by the life tech innovations from India. Okay, reasonable. Third question to end the session. Would it be Dr. Purushottam or Dr. Guy? Dr. Guy. Guy is generative AI. Okay, so it's man or this thing, right? So is it 2026? Would it be a combination of both, or would it be Guy or Purushottam there? A combination. How many of you say it's going to be a combination and it's going to be an increased one there? Wonderful. Thank you so much for being a very patient audience. I think we consumed and overshot whatever time was assigned to us. The panelists, we will all be there on the foyer and we can have some casual discussions there. Do I have time to take one question?
Yeah, we can have some questions from the audience.
Sure.
Any questions from the audience?
We'll permit 2 questions. Please introduce yourself and rather than a comment, we would welcome questions. Any questions out there? Please raise your hands, okay?
Thank you. This is Bharat Kera from HCHC. My question is to the panel. We talked about this global potential. Israel is really way ahead and very competent in the medtech space. Wherever I go for accelerators pitches, I always hear a competitor is always from Israel. How can we compete better against Israel?
Okay. Can you point it out to Ashwin? Do you want to take this?
Yeah, I'm not sure I mean, they are one of the competitors, right? And this is across spaces, not just healthcare. They are one of the competitors, and I think I treat them as one of the competitors. I think where our products out of India, not just in health, but in other areas as well, the advantage that we have is a very good test market. We are not a volume market, we are not a velocity market when it comes to Indian enterprises. But we are a fantastic product test market because the trouble, quote unquote, that an enterprise puts an entrepreneur or an innovator through before they adopt in India is so much that the product gets so refined that if you want to take it and sell it outside the country, when you're successful with good enterprises in India, you invariably end up becoming successful outside. So it's a fantastic test market. I feel Israel does not have as much of that test market. And the second part of it, which I have observed over the last maybe 5-6 years, is that there are so many innovators in Israel that innovators from Israel are coming to India to raise capital, right? So they need to go outside very often to raise capital. I think we are getting to a point where there's enough capital coming into India to address our innovators at scale. And I think that is going to, over time, it's not yet there, but over time that will become something that will give a tailwind to our innovations over, let's say, Israel.
Thanks for wrapping up the competitive advantage India there, right? Thank you.
Thank you. We have one last question.
One last question, please.
I'm not from the tech field. I'm a surgeon, so from the medical field, I'm afraid. Just wanted to plead to the honchos as well as to the innovators. Most of the time, when you all are actually discussing or doing the innovations, I think you should have a combination of people from different fields to start with. Because in the process, you might discover something much more useful rather than after diagnosing and the treatment. What I'm trying to say is, you all got the great opportunity to get people from different fields together. So that in the bargain, you might find an actually disease process being diagnosed rather than treating it after it being diagnosed. Classic example is the breast carcinoma. We all know that about 30% they've already lost it. Colorectal, at least 30 to 40% they've already lost it. All that we as surgeons do is we're just taking out the segment and hoping it'll be all right. So you all got a great opportunity, I think, to bring in the other specialists together at the table to start with and then see other fields as well. That's just a plea.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I think we definitely take that comment and advice. I believe it's all about interdisciplinary approach to innovation. Madhurima, would you want to probably add your comments on behalf of the panel to thank the doctor surgeon for his comments and advice? And,
No, I agree. We all talk about diversity everywhere in every field. So, what you said makes a lot of sense. Until unless there are diverse views, there are diverse thoughts, we will not have something which will be complete, really. There will be something missing. So thank you for sharing that.
With that, we come to the close of the session, and thanks for being a very patient audience. Okay, do we have time for one last question? One last one?
Okay, probably one last question.
Short one,
we
sir.
could take it up.
Thank you so much. I'm Jatin, a CEO and a co-founder with Claim Therapist. So this question is regarding the price discovery and on the price transparency when it comes to healthcare providers in India. So 2 years back, federal law in US has passed this law that, all the hospitals and healthcare unit have to show the price to the customer so the customer can take an informed decision, be it a cash customer or insurance customer. So do you think in India also we need such kinds of policy to have a price discovery across all the platforms so that end users or patients can take informed decisions?
Krishnan, would you want to take that?
No, certainly. I think there is a lot of opacity and that will help, but it's not only price, right? And I think that's the nature of the service, where it's combined with what the customer wants to get, right? And so I think a metric that is able to combine all of that, and also let's recognize that India is still a very uninsured market. So it's probably more about, having a composite score on what the product is, including price, rather than just an insurance versus cash trade-off.
Thank you, Krishnan. Thank you. With that, thanks once again for being a very patient and engaging audience, and I thank my co-panelists as well for sharing your very insightful perspectives. Thank you so much. It was a great learning experience. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists and moderator. Thank you for giving an opportunity for helping us look at the healthcare industry in a different perspectives and definitely strengthening the ecosystem.